Welcome to Simple Wonders, where I help you simplify home education so you can work wonders in your home. I'm Jessica, a homeschooling mom of 4 boys, here to guide you through the first steps of starting your homeschool journey. In this series, you'll learn how to get started, what you actually need to homeschool, and you'll develop real teaching skills, even if you've never taught a day in your life. I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. Let's get started. Hello, welcome back to my How to Homeschool series. This is week 5. Now, if you have not watched the other videos, I highly recommend watching them. They are in order, sequential order, just building on each other so that you can be ready to homeschool by September. So please, if you haven't, go back and watch those before you watch this one. Because this week, I'm going to talk to you about the 3 most important teaching tools that you can put in your teacher's belt to make you a more confident and effective teacher. And those tools are atmosphere, education, and life. Now you're going to say, what does that even mean? Those aren't really tools. They're so vague. When I first started on my quest to understand learning and how I can be a better teacher, I started doing tons of research into cognitive science. I've read dozen books on how to teach. And what I found is that Charlotte Mason, who was an educator during the late Victorian era, she died around, I believe it was 1920s. So she said that education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. And I feel like that really beautifully encompasses all the things that I have learned from current cognitive science and the research. So what does that actually mean? What does it mean education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life? Well, Charlotte Mason studied, observed, and taught in schools for over 40 years. And what is so interesting is that this really does encompass all of the science and the teaching tools that I've learned about. So when she says education is an atmosphere, and I'm going to quote this so I don't get it wrong. She said that education is an atmosphere. We do not mean that a child should be isolated in what we called a child environment, especially adapted and prepared, but that we should take into account the educational value of his natural home environment, the home atmosphere, both as regards persons and things, and should let him live freely among his proper conditions. It stultifies a child to bring down his world to the child's level. So, pretty much, when we make an artificial environment, we aren't really learning. When we have science experiments that we have practiced over and over again and we show the child and worked out all the kinks, they're not learning as much as if we had been doing the experiment together and working out the kinks until we get it right. Then she said, by education is a discipline. We mean the discipline of habits, formed definitely and thoughtfully, whether habits of mind or body. Physiologists tell us of the adaptation of brain structures to habitual lines of thoughts, i.e., to our habits. Okay, so another instrument or tool available to us is that we are teaching good habits, and we need to understand habit training to really teach our children well. And I'm going to go into detail each one of these, so don't worry. And then the third, education is a life. It says, in saying that education is a life, the need of intellectual and moral as well as of physical sustenance is implied. The mind feeds on ideas, and therefore children should have a generous curriculum. So the mind is like a living thing, and I love this analogy because it's really not a vessel that's being filled with knowledge. If it was, then we would remember everything we learned, and our children would remember everything that we dumped into their brain, but they don't, right? Some things are really taken up and some things are just discarded. And it's like our digestive system. Sometimes when we eat, our bodies take certain nutrients and things it needs, and then it just discards the rest. And I have noticed that my boys' brains and my own mind are a lot like that. So Charlotte Mason said this before social science was considered a science, and before we had very little knowledge in her time with the brain, the mind, and cognition. We know so much more. And what is amazing to me is what she said, what we know now fits in so well with what she said. So the human mind learns from real, genuine exposure and forming relationships with the world around them. And I'm talking about relationships by you get to know something by playing with it, by moving it around, by being exposed to it in different situations, being exposed to it over and over again. That's what she means by atmosphere, by forming relationships with the world around us and with people. Then we also learn from habits. So when you do soccer drills, when you hit a baseball with a bat over and over again, then you are learning a habit and a cue. And then when you're handwriting and you're writing over and over and over again and practicing it, you are getting a habit in your mind, and that is part of education. And then the last part of education is ideas. Now, you think about when you're reading a history book, when you are reading a science or a nature study book, and you just get this light bulb. You're like, oh, that makes sense, or that idea is so interesting. Like when a boiled, peeled egg is put on top of a glass bottle, and there's a flame in it, and the flame uses up the air, the oxygen, and sucks the egg into this tiny hole. That is a cool idea. The idea of how you create a vacuum effect, right? That is really what's cool to kids, those ideas that spark something in them and it feeds their mind. So those are the three main instruments. Now, over the next few days, I am going to share one video a day where I'm going to talk about atmosphere, discipline, and life, and I'm going to bring in the cognitive science of each one, and I'm going to bust some myths on the way, because there are a lot of myths in education about how things should be taught. And I'm going to talk about why those are wrong, why you should be doing these things instead, and this is not based on me, this is not based solely on Charlotte Mason, who lived 150 years ago. This is based on science, based on the many books that I've read about how people learn. And I'm so excited to share these with you so you can be an amazing teacher for your kids and feel confident and do the best education you can for them at home. So over the next week, I'm going to share videos about atmosphere, discipline, and life. I'm going to go and bust some myths that surround education. I think it's very pernicious myths. These are very pernicious myths among not only public school, private school, but among homeschool moms. When we bring our kids home, we think, oh, this is how it needs to be done because this is how it is done in public school or whatever school. And this is completely untrue. I'm going to bust all those myths, and I'm going to tell you a better way to teach, one that is going to be simple and effective, and it's going to bring you a lot more peace and just more peace in your home. And then I'm going to talk about the actual science of these tools. So why it works, and then how to apply them in your home, how to apply them with whatever curriculum you have, or use those to look for a good curriculum if you don't have one already. So don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're notified whenever these new videos come out.